There was a chill in the air as night fell over the small landscape of Riverbend Farm. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and crimson, but something darker than the coming night lurked in the distance. You could feel it, like a crackling charge that rode the wind. Old Man Jenkins stepped outside his weathered farmhouse, the wooden creaks echoing against the silence of the fields. With hands calloused from decades of toil, he clutched an old lantern that sputtered and flickered, casting shadows that danced across the sagging barn. To anyone else, the quiet of the night might bring comfort, but for Jenkins, it was the stillness of a storm brewing on the horizon. Earlier that day, whispers had reached him in town the Marauders were coming. A gang feared for ravaging farms, stealing crops, and terrorizing those who resisted. Jenkins had seen them pass through the neighboring towns, ruthless men with dark eyes and hard faces, fueled by greed and the thrill of chaos. So the news didn't send a wave of fear through him, it lit a fire. It ignited something primal, but those who knew him knew better. Jenkins was a man of the earth, and he would not be pushed around. His farm wasn't just land, it was legacy, sweat, and heart. As the last sliver of daylight slipped away, a low rumble rolled through the air, neither a thunderous storm nor the hum of distant machinery. It was the sound of laboring horses, the crunch of boots on dirt, and the unmistakable scent of mischief. Shadows congregated in the distance, dark forms moving swiftly, purposefully. The lantern flickered one last time and then went out, leaving him swallowed by the dark. Had he ever felt fear? He thought of his father, who had fought in the old wars, who told him stories of taking a stand, never retreating. Fear was a luxury for weaker men, and despair had no place in a home built of courage. It was time to protect what was his. Jenkins paused, allowing the darkness to settle around him like a heavy blanket. With a deep inhale, he stepped back into the farmhouse and grabbed the old rifle that had hung above the mantel for years. He'd polished the wood and kept it clean, believing that he might one day need it. That day had come. He pushed open the heavy door, and the creaking echoed out into the night like a warning. It was a silent promise to himself. He would stand, he would fight. Out in the fields, figures began to emerge, spirits of destruction marching like shadows bent on pillaging. Their laughter cut through the night, brazen and cold, showing no respect for the hard work Jenkins had put into his land. They were drawing closer now, necks craned, eyes glistening with the thrill of conquest. Yet instead of the fear that should have gripped his heart, a fierce resolve surged through him. He felt the power of the soil beneath his worn boots, the whispers of the crops he had nurtured, and the fierce spirit of generations who had come before him. This land held memories of laughter, toil, blood, and tears, and he would not let them take it. With a steady hand, he made his way to the barn. There, he hadn't just kept tools and machinery. He had stashed all he could against this day potentially dawning. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing stacks of hay bales, tools glinting ominously in the moonlight, and a sense of purpose hanging in the air as thick as the dust. He arranged the bales to form makeshift barricades, feeling the adrenaline throb through his veins. Just then a voice shouted, loud and mocking, ripping through the silence. "Hey, old man, come on out." Jenkins squinted into the darkness, heart pounding, yet grounded in his resolve. It was a tactic meant to intimidate, to scare him into submission. It would not work. He shouted back, voice rising above the night air, strong and unwavering. Silence fell like a blanket. For a moment he felt the weight of their gaze, assessing, weighing their next move. Marauders were not known for courage. They lived off the fear they inspired in others. The laughter from the band turned nervous, murmurs replacing bravado. A miscalculation had been made. They didn't expect him to stand. As they gathered closer, eyes glinting in the moonlight, Jenkins could see their faces, hardened and weary, faces that would always chase after what was not theirs. He felt anger boiling within, but also a strange sense of pity. In their hunger, they had lost their way, lost respect for labor, for sacrifice. Now they were just shells governed by darkness. From behind the stacks of hay, Jenkins fired a warning shot, the bullet slicing through the night and shattering their confidence. Panic erupted, but it was not the chaos he expected. It was them retreating, fear etched on their faces. A sense of triumph surged through him. He saw it spread among the Marauders, but Jenkins wasn't about to let their hesitation lead to retreat. He stepped from behind his barricade. "You don't want to do this." The laughter disappeared, and in its place, the grim tension tangled in the air. Jenkins stood tall, a silhouette against the night, the rifle steady in his hands, the flickering moon casting shadows across his weathered face, revealing the years of hard work and determination. He shouted. Another figure, larger and bravado, spilling out like a broken dam, stepped forward. The others held back, eyes darting between Jenkins and their leader. "You think you can scare us?" Jenkins replied, voice low but filled with an authority that held weight. "But this is my home. This land has seen life, and I will protect it." A challenge lingered in the air, thick as smoke, as the two sides faced off under the watchful eyes of night. Without warning, the Marauders began to close in, menacing silhouettes creeping forward. But Jenkins stood firm, supported by the heartbeats of those who had come before him. The clash was swift and brutal. Jenkins was no stranger to hard labor, but this was different. His spirit guided him. Swinging his rifle like a club, he blocked their attempts to close in, giving ground but refusing to submit. Each blow resonated with purpose. It became a dance of survival. Dust swirled and echoes of shouts and curses filled the air. But amidst the noise, the farmer's heart roared louder, fueled by memories and passion. He remembered his father's lessons, instilled through years of hardship. The Marauders started to falter. Jenkins was relentless, the flicker of light from cracks in the barn catching the glint in his eyes. There was fire in his soul now, years of hard work fueling his resolve. His resolve threatened their intimidation, something they had never before encountered. Just like that, a rift began to form in the Marauders' ranks, some looking uncertain, others desperate. A glance exchanged back and forth until the whispers rose to a shout among themselves. And in that moment, Jenkins saw it, the cracks of hesitation in their bravado. His voice rose over the chaos, sharp as a whip. "I am the blood, sweat, and tears of this land." An eerie silence descended upon the field as the weight of his words hung in the air. Those stolen stories of hard labor resonated, echoing back to them. They were all too aware of their own tales, marked not by respect, but by loss. One by one, some turned back, hesitation creeping into their steps. Jenkins pressed on, taking the opportunity. Every pulse of this earth sings of perseverance. And just like that, the stakes shifted. The Marauders began to fall apart. Laughter turned to confusion before melting fully into a fear that mirrored Jenkins' strength. The aura of fear was no longer within him, but reflected in their shame. They were losing the battle. With one final, desperate rush, Jenkins swung his rifle, catching the leader off guard. He went down like a toppled oak, the coordination of their ranks unraveling. But instead of taking further action, Jenkins stepped back, chest heaving, heart racing. It wasn't about proving strength, it was about healing. As dawn began to break, illuminating the battlefield, the Marauders fled, some leaving their pride in the dust. Jenkins watched as, one by one, they turned and ran. The sun peered shyly above the horizon, painting everything golden. Old man Jenkins took a deep breath, letting the warmth wash over him, relief flooding his veins. The silence was thick now, but he would remember the sounds of earlier, the laughter that drove from streets to crescendo, the dark forms that filled his vision, and the burning resolve that had come to light. He looked down at his trembling hands, feeling the weight of what had been overcome. "You have to be brave," he whispered to the morning, to the world that breathed life into him. The beauty of a new day washed over Riverbend Farm, a reminder that while darkness might surround, it was the light of resilience that would always break through. Old man Jenkins stood not just as a solitary figure against Marauders, but a guardian of a dream, a testament that a farmer could withstand the hardest of storms and refuse to fall. The sun was beginning to set over the sprawling fields of Green Hollow Farm, casting an orange glow that danced over rows of ripe corn and swaying wheat. In the tranquil air, a sense of normalcy reigned, as if the world had paused to let the farmer, Sam Henderson, savor the fruits of his labor. But beneath the soft rustling of leaves, the tension of restless shadows lingered, darkening the horizon. As Sam leaned against the wooden fence, taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around him, a distant rumble broke the silence. It wasn't thunder, but something heavier, more ominous, the unmistakable sound of hooves pounding on dirt. The air thickened with paranoia. An unease seeped into the evening air. Sam's heart began to race. He had heard whispers in town about a gang of marauders sweeping through the countryside, terrorizing farms and dismantling lives. They took everything, from crops to livestock, to the very will of the farmers to stand against them. He looked out over his fields, a place he had poured his soul into for decades. Would they come for his home? A cold wind brushed against him, sending a chill down his spine. Drawing a deep breath, he pushed the fear aside. He had built everything he owned with his own hands. He'd faced storms, droughts, and the relentless pressure of a changing world. He would not let marauders reduce him to trembling regret. The pounding grew louder, now unmistakably approaching the farm. Sam's gaze fixed on the dust clouds forming along the road, figures appearing like specters emerging from the evening haze. There they were, dark silhouettes on horseback, menacing and confident, a cruel smile playing on their lips. Each stomp of their hooves seemed to echo a chilling taunt. This was their world now. He felt anger surge within him, fighting against the instinct to hide. With quick determination, he pivoted and sprinted toward the barn. Time was fleeting. He had to prepare. This was his land, and he would protect it, even if it meant standing alone against a horde. Inside the barn, familiar scents surrounded him: hay, earth, and the comforting essence of years of hard work. He seized an old rifle that had been passed down through generations, the wood warm from years of careful handling. He felt a surge of ancestral strength binding him. His grandfather had fought for his home in a different kind of war, and now it was his turn to carry that legacy forward. With rifle in hand, Sam stepped out from behind the barn, heart pounding but resolve firm. The shadows of the approaching men grew clearer, their laughter grating against the stillness. They had no respect for the land or its people. They only wanted destruction. One of them shouted, voice dripping with mockery, "Why don't you just hand over what we want?" Sam took a steadying breath, channeling every ounce of courage in him. "This is my land." They stopped, surprised by his defiance. Most farmers they encountered fell to their knees, terrified and resigned. He could see confusion flickering on their faces, a little uncertainty creeping in. It was as if they had expected him to quiver, to hide. But Sam stood taller, the rifle resting confidently across his arm. With their leader tall, brutish, with a scar running across his left cheek sneering down at him, the gang hesitated. They were used to easy victories. Would they press on? The leader challenged. "Maybe," Sam answered, voice steady. With that, a piercing silence enveloped the field. The marauders exchanged uncertain glances, the jeering laughter faltering. Sam seized the moment. This was psychological warfare, where fear often won out over strength. But he knew something they didn't. Courage could spark rebellion even in the faintest heart. With a quick motion, he raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, the loud crack reverberating against the evening sky. The sound silenced their arrogance and sent a jolt of fear rippling through the group. Horses stomped in agitation, sensing their riders' wavering confidence. The marauders recoiled, eyes wide, the reality of the situation sinking in. It wasn't just a farmer defending his home. It was a man standing his ground, embodying years of hard work and resilience. "Leave my farm. You have until the sun sets behind those trees," Sam commanded, voice resounding with authority. The leader's bravado cracked. He gestured aggressively to his men, but something had shifted. The once cocky gang now scanned the surroundings, weighing their options. Sam stood firm, unwavering, no hint of fear. "Remember what you came for," Sam added, his voice sharp like a knife. In that moment, something unfurled inside him. He thought back to his father, who had taught him the value of integrity and fighting for what was right. "This isn't just about crops or livestock. This is my home, my family legacy." A flicker of recognition passed among the marauders. Their leader's bravado dimmed, the laughter fading. They were predators turned uncertain. But then, with a defiant snicker, the leader laughed. He motioned to his men, signaling for an attack. The horses surged forward, hooves pounding against the earth, rattling Sam's resolve momentarily. He braced himself, heart racing, feet planted firmly. But in that deafening moment, he felt something else, a surge of purpose, the memories of generations past coursing through him. He lifted his rifle once more. With precision and determination, he fired off another shot, this time striking the ground near the horse's hooves. They skittered sideways, rearing back in fear. The marauders hesitated, uncertainty creeping back into their eyes. "Stand down," he shouted, voice cutting through the air like a thunderclap. The leader hesitated, the tension palpable. Perhaps they had never truly been challenged before. Perhaps they had forgotten the meaning of respect, of fear, of standing for something greater than themselves. With trembling hands but a steady heart, Sam prepared for what might come next. He had faced storms that tossed his crops, relentless suns that scorched the land, and heartbreak in every corner of his life. And yet here in this moment, he stood resolute against chaos itself. Some of the marauders shifted, voices lowering as doubt filled the ranks. Sam realized then that his courage was sowing seeds of change even within their hardened hearts. "You have families too, don't you? Do you take pride in what you're doing here?" The group exchanged uncertain glances. A murmur swept through them, doubt slipping into their defiance. Sam could feel the tide turning, could sense the fractured spirit among them. "Leave now and take your lives back," he urged, voice softer but no less earnest. In that moment, one of the younger marauders, shoulders hunched as if the weight of the world rested upon him, turned his horse around, uncertainty flooding his expression. He asked, more to himself than to anyone else. The leader cursed under his breath, but others began to murmur in agreement. It was as if a crack had formed in the facade of their bravado. With shaky breaths, Sam felt something begin to shift in the air around them. "You're stronger than this," he pressed, seeing their hesitation, their longing for something more. For the first time, realization flickered across their faces. Slowly they began to back away, momentarily torn between standing their ground or falling back into the shadows of the night. The leader shouted, voice grating with desperation. But it was too late. Their confidence shattered, and one by one, the marauders turned their horses, the dust swirling around them as they retreated into the night. Sam stood tall, breathless but resolute, heart hammering in his chest like a drum of victory. The sunrise cut through the darkness like a blade, bathing Green Hollow Farm in soft, golden light. Sam blinked, relief flooding his veins as he watched the marauders vanish into the distance. He had fought for his home, for the land that had given him everything. And with courage blooming in the air, he felt the weight of the world light. The sun was rising, but the battle was more than just against marauders. It was against complacency itself. Sam took a moment to breathe, the golden rays warming his face, inhaling the life that surrounded him. The soil beneath his feet felt strong, resilient, ready to grow. From that day forward, the farm became a symbol of place where courage thrived, where a man had stood against the darkness, refusing to fall. He welcomed neighbors, shared lessons, and turned fear into hope. In every seed he planted and every crop harvested, his legacy endured, a testament to the power of standing your ground and lifting each other up. And so, Green Hollow Farm stood proud, surrounded by fields, yes, but even more so, surrounded by the spirit of resilience that would forever bloom against any darkness that dared to threaten its light. The dying light of day painted the sky in fiery hues of gold and crimson, casting long shadows over the fields of Greenwood Farm. The towering corn swayed gently in the evening breeze, and for a moment all was serene. But within that tranquility lay a pulse of dread, echoing through the heart of Jacob Turner, the farmer who had tilled this land for nearly 20 years. As he stood by the barn, wiping sweat off his brow, a tremor rolled through the ground. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance, causing his heart to quicken. It wasn't the sound of a passing wagon or the arrival of friendly neighbors. No, these were heavy, deliberate beats, ominous and threatening, like a storm rolling in. Jacob felt the blood drain from his face as he squinted into the amber haze, seeing figures emerge, dark silhouettes gathering like vultures overhead. Marauders. He had heard the whispers in town, tales of a gang that rode from place to place, preying on unsuspecting farmers. They swept through small towns like wildfire, leaving nothing but wreckage in their path. And now they had come for him. As the hoofbeats grew louder, panic clawed at Jacob's chest. He had two choices, flee or fight. Fleeing meant leaving behind everything he had built: the farm, his father's legacy, the dreams woven into the soil. No, he would not run. The thought tightened the grip of determination around his heart. Jacob turned and dashed across the yard, adrenaline surging through him. He wasn't unprepared. Years of hard labor had forged resilience in his bones. He raced toward the wooden shed, the familiar smells of hay and earth igniting a fierce loyalty within him. Inside the shed, Jacob grabbed a weathered rifle that had been passed down through generations. Its weight felt comforting in his hands, a weapon against despair, a reminder that standing up for what was right is often the most difficult yet necessary choice. As he peered outside, his eyes darted to the horizon, where shadows loomed larger with each passing moment. He yelled, voice laced with defiance, when he spotted the gang coming to a halt directly in front of his home. Their laughter rang out, cruel and mocking, drowning the serenity of dusk. The leader dismounted, a burly man with a scar running across one cheek, his face twisted in a cruel grin. "You think some old rifle's gonna scare us?" In that instant, Jacob felt every fiber of his being ignite, fury flooding his veins. "This is my home." The Marauders glanced at each other, uncertainty creeping into their arrogance. They weren't used to facing farmers who dared to stand against them. Most would have already given in, shaking with fear and begging for mercy. Jacob's defiance unsettled them, like a lit match in a pool of gasoline. At that moment, a chill swept through the air, a grave warning that the tide of violence was about to unfold. Jacob raised his rifle, steadied his breath, and fired a shot into the air. The sound thundered like a dragon awakening from slumber, echoing across the fields. The Marauders flinched, horses rearing back in surprise. "Leave now." Jacob's voice cut through the chaos, unwavering and strong. A gust of wind seemed to steal the sound of laughter, leaving only the echo of strength in its wake. Jacob stood tall against the heightening threat, fueled by not just survival but by a profound connection to the land he walked. The memory of his father flashed before him, an image of a man standing resolute against storms, against everything that sought to tear him down. The leader's bravado began to wane. He stepped forward, gesturing to his men, but Jacob pressed forward, unwavering. "I've been outnumbered my whole life." The atmosphere shifted as uncertainty rippled through the Marauders. They began to glance nervously at one another, their bravado shaken. It was clear they hadn't expected a fight like this. They were there for terror, not for a true battle of wills. Jacob, sensing their hesitation, decided to push further. "You think strength is in numbers? It's in heart." Another Marauder with a youthful face lowered his gaze, suddenly grappling with doubt. Jacob seized that glimmer of vulnerability and directed his words at him. "Do you really want to stand with them? Do you want to carry this shame, this cowardice?" A flicker of confusion crossed the young man's face, his shoulders drooping slightly, a shimmer of humanity breaking through the tough facade. The leader barked, red anger pooling in his eyes. He stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to charge. But just as he prepared to strike, Jacob fired another shot, this time closer to the Marauder's feet. Dust flew into the air, the sound cascading through the field like a thunderous warning. "Back away!" Jacob shouted, holding the rifle firmly, every muscle tensed, embodying the weight of struggle. The gang paused. In that precious moment, uncertainty sowed seeds of fear. One by one, some of those Marauders began to shift on their feet, uneasy glances trading among them. The leader sensed the shifting winds, rage boiling over. "You're making a mistake, Turner." Jacob fired back, voice calm yet resolute. The murmur of discontent within the Marauders simmered, hesitance mingling with the grit of war. Their faces shifted from a mask of cockiness to soft whispers of dread. Jacob stepped forward, rifle steady, a force of nature in his own right. "You're stronger than this, even amidst the shadows." The inner turmoil deepened among the Marauders, doubts swirling like the dust at their feet. For the first time, Jacob saw some of them looking back at their leader, uncertainty blooming into dissent. "Let's get out of here," muttered the young man from earlier, glancing uncertainly at his companions. Jacob seized on this moment of weakness. He asked, voice low and inviting, "This is your chance. Choose a better life." As murmurs broke out amongst the group, Jacob understood. Vulnerability was powerful. To face down violence with courage was one thing, but to encourage others to walk away from it, now that was something different altogether. In that fragile moment, the Marauders appeared to waver on the edge of choice, a precipice between destruction and redemption. The leader, now seething with anger and desperation, barked futile commands, attempting to rally his men. But they were beginning to falter, the shadows of regret creeping in. In the stillness, the sunlight began to dip below the horizon, bathing everything in orange light, a symbol of the potential for new beginnings. The air grew thick, tension vibrating between Jacob and the Marauders, a defining moment clinging to the sunset like a final curtain. "Leave this land," Jacob shouted, determination blazing in his eyes. It wasn't just about his farm, it was about standing up for the essence of choice, of light battling against dark. And just like that, the spell broke slowly, the gang began to back away. The leader clenched his fist in frustration, defiance cracking beneath the weight of self-doubt. His men were peeling off, one by one, retreating like shadows into the dusk. Jacob allowed himself a breath, heart racing, knowing this moment was not yet over. He called out. A young man broke away completely, leaning into Jacob's words, his courage rekindled. "I don't want to do this." With that, more of them began to follow suit, finally pulling away from their leader's grip. In a flash, the mob turned from marauders to mere men, all seeking an escape from the madness ignited by one brave farmer who refused to relinquish hope. The leader's anger boiled over as he turned in disbelief. "You cowards!" He roared, galloping off into the distance, the remnants of his gang trailing behind, shadows blending into twilight. Jacob felt every ounce of resilience and fear bursting forth like a tide, a wave crashing against rocks. They had retreated. He hadn't just defended his farm, he had ignited something in them. With a trembling grip, he lowered his rifle, heart still racing within his chest as the echoes of hooves faded into the night. The fields, once a stage set for violence, were now bathed in the gentle light of a rising moon. There in the silence under the stars, Jacob felt his fatigue slowly give way to exhilaration. The courage to stand, to refuse to fall. This was more than a battle fought with weapons. It was a testament to the human spirit, to the power of choice. With renewed resolve, he looked over his farm, seeing not just land but a future, a landscape kissed by resilience. The soil whispered promises of new seasons and possibilities, and he stood firmly rooted in the fertile ground of hope. From that day on, the echoes of Marauders became nothing but memories. A story of courage passed through whispered tales in town. Jacob Turner became a symbol of strength, a farmer who had stood against the tide and refused to fall, a beacon of light for all who sought peace against the encroaching darkness. His land thrived once more, untouched and fierce, blossoming with life and legacy, reminding all who ventured past that in the heart of bravery there lay the seed of triumph. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields of Maplewood Farm. The air was thick with the rich scent of earth and ripening corn, a golden landscape cradled in the arms of late summer. Farmers like Frank Thompson had invested their lives into the land, their hands calloused from years of toil and struggle. But today, as Frank wiped the sweat from his brow, he could feel the calm before the storm. A distant drumming broke the serene afternoon, the sound creeping closer until it became unmistakable, hooves pounding against the dry ground. Anxiety tightened in Frank's chest, and his heart raced. He had heard the tales swirling through the streets of town. Marauders were coming, a ragtag gang of outlaws who sought to rob, destroy, and lay waste to the small farms dotting the surrounding countryside. Just last week, a neighboring farmer had rushed into town, wild-eyed and shaking, recounting how they had arrived like a whirlwind, devouring everything in their path. Frank took a calming breath, glancing toward the horizon where shadows loomed, silhouettes rapidly closing in. Staying put wasn't an option. He had worked too hard for that. Maplewood wasn't just a patch of land. It was a legacy, a promise made to his ancestors. Frank moved toward the barn, determination driving his steps. He felt the weight of 1,000 days of labor resting on his shoulders as he entered the cool, dim space. Inside, tools hung on the walls, memories of countless harvests echoing in the corners. His fingers grazed over the worn handle of the pitchfork, the wood familiar against his skin. It was a weapon against despair. He grabbed an old rifle that had been passed down through generations. The rifle wasn't just for show. It was a testament to his family's willingness to stand firm against threats, even when the odds were against them. Frank stepped outside again, the late afternoon sun warm against his back. The Marauders were closer now, their laughter ringing out in the air like a mocking gravestone. Fear washed through the air like a cruel tide, but with it came clarity. He would not let fear dictate his actions. "Hey!" One of the Marauders called out, bold and cocky as he rode forward. "You'd best just give in, hand over your food and livestock." Frank stood tall, rifle raised. "You think I'll just give it all away? This is my home." Laughter erupted from the group, shrill and menacing. The leader, a large man with a scar running down his cheek, dismounted and stepped forward, confidence dripping from his every motion. "You're just one man, old farmer. You're outnumbered." Frank felt anger boiling beneath his skin. He knew the stories of farmers who had broken under pressure, who had taken their families and fled. But this wasn't just about him. This was about every farmer whose labor had been eroded by the greed of others. With steady hands, he aimed at the ground, taking a deep breath. Boom! The rifle shot echoed across the field, jolting the gang into a stunned silence. Dust flew up around the feet of the horses, and startled whinnies punctuated the quiet. Some of the Marauders took a step back, hesitance creeping into their postures. "I'm not afraid of you," Frank shouted, his voice firm and unwavering. The Marauders exchanged glances, the bravado starting to flicker in their eyes. Frank could feel the tide beginning to shift, a wave of defiance washing over their fear. Perhaps they hadn't encountered a farmer willing to take a stand before. Perhaps they had underestimated him. For a moment, it felt as if the world hit pause. The leader hesitated, irritation flaring across his face. "You think you've scared us?" Frank's resolve only strengthened. "I've seen men like you come and go. You've nothing but a fleeting shadow. But this land is alive. It has memories, it has roots, and it has a heart." The leader narrowed his eyes, unsure of what to do next. Would they push on, or were they going to be cowed by the voice of a single man? As the sunlight spilled golden across the fields, Frank recognized the moment, the turning point where courage met fear. He lifted his rifle again, a fierce look in his eyes. "This is your last chance." But then, without warning, one of the younger Marauders, an unshaven kid, perhaps no older than 20, spoke up. "Wait." His voice was small, trembling under the weight of the moment. The leader shot him a scathing glance, but the kid didn't waver. His hands shook slightly, but there was a spark of something humility that began to tear at the facade of the gang. The young man continued, "They're just trying to live." Faces twisted in confusion and tension. Frank seized the moment, the shifting of a tide, the faltering bravado of bullies confronted with reality. "You don't have to be part of this," he urged. The Marauder leader sneered, trying to regain control. "Shut your mouth." But the murmurs of doubt among the gang members grew louder. The once united front was fragmenting, and Frank could feel the energy shifting. The young man stepped forward, voice steady. "I don't want to hurt anyone." As emotions began to unravel, the Marauders glanced back and forth, uncertainty blossoming in their eyes. Frank held on, fueled by their flickering humanity. "We all want a place to call home." The sounds of the farm were alive, the rustling corn, the calls of birds, the gentle breeze, all reminders of what was truly at stake. Frank lowered his rifle a fraction, embodying a fierce and collective hope. The leader barked, desperation making his voice shrill, but it was too late. The dissent was stronger than his rage. One by one, the gang members began to back away, confusion etched on their faces, their leader left standing in disbelief. He raged. Frank felt a surge of triumph as, like a line of dominoes, the Marauders began to turn their horses back toward the darkness from which they had come. The air began to calm, the tension dissolving into an unfamiliar sense of victory. Frank shouted after them, heart racing with exhilaration. As the last of them disappeared into the distance, Frank stood there, breathing heavily, pulse pounding like a drum. It wasn't just about victory, it was about standing firm against the tide of intimidation. His heart swelled with pride, every fear now replaced by the power of choices made in hope. But then it dawned on him that this was not the end. Frank understood then that each errant horse could represent a deeper humanity, a chance for redemption. It wasn't just a battle for his farm. It was a chance for others to reaffirm their paths, to break free from cycles of fear. Over that long evening, as the stars blinked into existence above the fields of Maplewood, Frank Thompson sat on the porch of his farmhouse, reflecting on the day. He felt the warmth of the earth beneath him, the echo of 1,000 conversations carried by the wind, and the legacy of all those who had come before him. He knew tomorrow would bring its own battles, for life on the farm was never easy. But he also understood that fear would no longer rule over him, that resilience would always rise. As the moon cast its silver light across the fields, a sense of calm washed over Maplewood. The shadows of Marauders no longer lingered. Instead, there was hope in the air, a vibrant pulse, growing day by day. The land was alive, and Frank would nurture it fiercely, standing resolute against all that threatened to tear it apart. He had fought for more than just his farm. He had fought for the belief that courage could ignite change, and that sometimes, in the face of darkness, the heart of a farmer shines the brightest. And so, on that quiet night under a canopy of stars, Maplewood thrived once more, a testament to resilience, to bravery, and the choices we make to stand tall against the tide of adversity. Frank Thompson had not just survived, he had thrived, embodying the spirit of a man who refused to fall. The sky had darkened almost suddenly, as if a heavy curtain had been pulled across the sunset. The once vibrant hues of orange and pink were swallowed by rolling clouds, and a chill ran through the air, hinting at something ominous lurking just beyond the horizon. It was on this foreboding evening that Jacob Collins stood at the edge of his property, peering into the distance. His heart raced. He could feel it in his bones. Something was coming. It began with a distant rumble that echoed like thunder, but it wasn't the storm he thought. No, this was different. The thud of hooves struck the ground, a rhythm that grew louder with each passing moment. Jacob squinted, eyes narrowing to catch the first glimpse of the Marauders. They emerged like ghouls from the shadows, riding hard and fast across the landscape that he had called home for so long. Panic surged through him, but he quashed it. He had spent a lifetime cultivating this land, pouring sweat and love into each furrow, each seed. This was not just a farm. It was his father's legacy, the home where his children had run free, the place where memories had been woven into the very fabric of the fields. He would not let them take that away. As the Marauders closed in, Jacob's mind raced. He knew the stories of fear-stricken farmers who had surrendered without a fight, their lives reduced to nothing more than pawns to the whims of brutal men. But he was not them. He refused to accept that fate. He turned and rushed into the barn, the door creaking in protest. Inside, the familiar scent of hay and wooden beams greeted him. He had prepared for this moment, even if he hadn't known it. The old shotgun leaned against the wall, dust-covered but ready for action. Jacob wiped it clean, the cool metal feeling solid and reassuring in his hands. The chaos grew as the Marauders dismounted, laughter spilling into the air, a sound tainted with malice and arrogance. One of them sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Jacob stepped into the light, gun raised. The Marauders paused, surprised. In their eyes, he was just an old man with a rusty gun. They thought they had the upper hand. The leader, a hulking figure with a scar across his forehead, smirked, unfazed. "You think that gun can save you? You're outnumbered." With every ounce of conviction, Jacob shouted back, "This is my land." As the gang exchanged doubtful glances, Jacob could feel the tension in the air shift, like a storm waiting to break. He had seen too much loss, borne too many burdens. He could not back down now. The leader stepped forward, a mocking smile on his lips. "Old man, let me make it simple for you. You can either give us what we want." A wave of uncertainty rippled through the group. Jacob could sense it, their bravado faltering. He took a step forward, his voice steady. "You think you can spread fear here? You've got another thing coming." With that, the leader's eyes narrowed dangerously. Jacob felt a fire ignite within him. What kind of man rides with a gang that terrorizes farmers? In that moment, something unexpected happened. One of the younger Marauders, a boy who could hardly be older than 18, looked uncertain. Jacob caught the flicker of conflict in his eyes, and he pressed on. "You don't have to do this." They had come to steal, to hurt, and yet here was a chance to sow doubt, a seed of humanity that could break through the darkness. He knew it wasn't just about defending his farm. It was about standing up against a cycle of violence that had gripped people like this young man. The leader barked, "Ignore him," but the boy didn't look convinced. Jacob urged, his voice ringing with earnestness. "You can be more than just a part of this misery. You can choose differently. I know what it's like to struggle to fight for what's right. We all want to survive. We all want a place called home." The hesitant looks exchanged among the marauders began to multiply. Jacob saw doubt creep into their ranks, flickering like candle flames in the wind. The leader's face contorted with rage. Enough of this. He reached for his own weapon, but Jacob stood his ground, his rifle unwavering. "I'd rather fight for what's right than live in shame," Jacob declared, heart pounding. He could feel the weight of the moment. It lingered in the air, a fragile balance between chaos and hope. Jacob shouted, desperation fueling his voice. But then, at the very edge of their group, the young marauder spoke up again. "You're right," he whispered, shaking visibly. "I don't want to be a part of this." The leader's eyes widened in disbelief, his hold on the group slipping. He snapped, fury bubbling over. But the sound of one voice seemed to give strength to the others, and soon several more of the gang members looked uncertain, glancing at one another as if suddenly waking from a nightmare. Jacob had no time to waste. He seized the moment. "You can choose to leave. You can ride away from this life of chaos." The marauders looked from Jacob to their leader, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. One by one, heads began to shake, their resolve crumbling. The young marauder stepped forward, eyes burning with determination. "I don't want to hurt anyone." The leader's anger surged, a petulant child grasping for control over a fading dream. He shouted, but already some were turning their horses away, slowly backing down, fear overtaking bravado. Jacob's heart soared. "You're making the right choice. Turn back now and let's not become enemies." The gang was scattering, unraveling, the shadows peeling away. That was the tipping point. As the gang reeled from the reality set before them, Jacob stood firm, grip steady on his weapon, a testament to the resilience that emerged in vulnerability. In a surge, the marauders fled, fleeing from chaos, fleeing from shame, fleeing from a future bereft of meaning. The last echoes of hooves pounded against the earth. Jacob felt a flood of relief coursing through him, a victory more profound than he had ever known. The fields of Maplewood, once clouded by darkness, now basked in the glow of possibility. The sun broke through the clouds, illuminating Jacob's heart, the land around him bursting with life and promise. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a battle won. It was a chance to reshape futures, to create bridges instead of barriers. Over the following days, Jacob stood on his porch, the light of dawn glistening on the dew-kissed grass. He watched the world awakening, the whispers of the wind carrying stories of resilience. The land seemed to sigh with relief, breathing easy after the weight of fear had been lifted. And as the seasons rolled on, Jacob grew more determined. He began to welcome neighbors and friends, organizing gatherings to discuss their stories and share their successes. He understood that their strength lay not just in isolation, but in the togetherness of community. Perhaps the marauders would find different paths, or perhaps they would return another day. But he knew now that the heart of a community could rise against the tide of chaos. Together, they could foster courage in the face of fear. The tales of that day became woven into the fabric of Maplewood. They were stories shared over the dinner table, tales of a farmer who refused to back down, who sparked a light in others. Jacob understood that standing tall was more than mere survival. It was about lifting those around him, about nurturing the soil of humanity that fed hope. As he walked through his fields, the sun setting behind the hills, Jacob remembered the faces of those marauders, their doubts and confusions. He had stood not just as a defender of his home, but as a reminder that even in the darkest times, the whisper of courage could echo loud enough to drown out the voices of despair. The farm thrived, not only because of the crops that blossomed, but in the spirit that surrounded it. Jacob knew, deep within him, that this was just the beginning. The seeds of resilience had been sown, and they would grow, even in the unlikeliest of places. Maplewood would endure, not merely as land, but as a beacon of strength for all those who dared to stand against the storm. And forevermore, Jacob Collins would remain its watchful guardian, a living testament to the truth that one voice could indeed change the world. The sun hung low over the wide expanse of green valley, casting deep shadows across rows of corn and golden wheat. This was a farm steeped in hard work and love, each blade of grass a testament to the labor that had nurtured it. But on this particular evening, a chill ran through the air, one that whispered of danger. Jacob Miller, a rugged farmer in his 40s, stood by the barn door, wiping his brow after a long day's work, when the faint sound of thunder reached his ears. It was not the kind that hinted at an approaching storm. No, this was a different kind of thunder. His heart raced as he recognized it, the rhythmic pounding of hooves against the earth, a rumble that brought with it the weight of dread and chaos. Glancing swiftly toward the tree line, he squinted into the distance. The figures were dark against the twilight sky. Marauders. These weren't just tales spun in whispers in the local tavern. Jacob had heard stories of their destruction, how they swept through towns like a plague, taking everything in their path without a care. And now, it seemed, they had come for his farm. His stomach sank as they drew closer, the gleam of metal catching the last rays of the sun. Panic threatened to overtake him, but he pushed it aside. This land was his life, his father's legacy. To let them take it would be to let his lineage fall. The weight of those generations gripped him. Jacob reached for his old shotgun, resting against the barn wall, its barrel dusty but reliable. He had vowed to his father the last time they had faced danger that he would protect this land at all costs. Today was that day. A deeper rumble caught his attention, and he stepped out into the open, steadying his grip on the weapon. The Marauders had dismounted, laughter echoing across the fields, dark and mocking. The leader of the group, a hulking figure clad in leather with a scar stretching across his cheek, approached with a swagger that reeked of arrogance. Well, look at this old farmer. What do you think you're gonna do?" He jeered, glancing around as if to spotlight the absurdity of the moment. The other Marauders laughed, their voices dripping with disdain. Jacob felt the heat of anger rise within him. "You'll take nothing from me," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. The leader's laughter faded into a sneer. "You've got guts, I'll give you that, but let's not pretend you can fight us. We're here for your crops, your livestock, a simple trade, really." In that moment, Jacob felt an electric surge pulse through him. He would not back down, not now, not ever. This was his home, and he would defend it against the tide of tyranny. The Marauder's eyes narrowed, calculating. There was a flicker of doubt glimmering in the leader's confidence. Jacob could see it, the wavering bravado of men who had spent their lives taking without giving back. But he did not have time to waver. He had to act now. With a practiced movement, he lifted the shotgun, its weight feeling just right. Another roar of laughter erupted from the Marauders, but Jacob could sense their intensity shifting. "Boys, listen up. You want to dance with this farmer." The leader raised his fists in mock celebration, but Jacob stood resolute. "I'll fight all of you if I must," he declared, voice thundering in the stillness of the evening. "But you should know this isn't just about crops. This is about my home, my family, and everyone who has ever fought to keep it." With a sudden roar, the leader charged forward, the rest of the gang following suit, attempting to break through Jacob's one-man defense. It was a moment filled with chaos, the world around him narrowing until all he could focus on was each step they took. But just as they surged, Jacob fired a warning shot into the ground, the deafening blast reverberating through the air. Dust kicked up, sending a wave of surprise through their ranks. Horses jumped and neighed, startled by the sudden display of defiance. The gang hesitated, their bluster dissipating momentarily. Jacob cried out, heart racing but steady. The Marauders exchanged fearful glances, the leader's bravado faltering. "You think that little gun can scare us?" But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Jacob sensed it, a crack in their facade. "You should be. You see, I've fought too hard to let men like you walk in here and take what isn't yours." And suddenly, without warning, one of the younger Marauders, a boy no older than 16, took a shaky step back. There was something in his eyes, confusion, doubt, fear. "Wait," he asked, his voice shaky. The leader snapped, but the boy didn't back down. Jacob saw a crack in their confidence, a flicker of humanity. He shouted, "Don't have to live like this. I know what it's like to fight for what matters. This land means everything to me." The leader turned red with rage, but now the other marauders were listening. They began exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from anger to uncertainty. "Look, man," the boy pleaded, "we can just leave," the leader shouted. As the back and forth escalated, Jacob pushed forward. "Think about it, you have a choice. You don't have to follow a coward who takes what others have bled for." A few of the marauders looked conflicted. They had stormed in expecting an easy fight, but were now caught in a tempest of choices. Jacob felt a flicker of hope. He might be able to sway them just by showing that courage came in many forms. Jacob asked, voice softer but steady, "You could walk away today, leave this life behind, and forge your own path." Another marauder spoke up, a cautious voice cutting through the tension. "He's right," he said, voice trembling. The leader snarled, but his control was slipping away. "He barked," shouted the young marauder, determination etched in his face. Jacob couldn't believe what he was seeing. The light of reason was creeping in, igniting something new. "You have to listen to your hearts," he pushed. "There's more to life than following a leader into darkness." An uneasy breath hung in the air, tension palpable. Jacob watched as the marauders exchanged hesitant glances, their resolve crumbling. The leader, realizing he was losing ground, lunged forward, but Jacob stood his ground. The shouting became desperate as the younger marauders began to peel away from the group, turning their backs on the leader's fury. One of them shouted, eyes defiant, fear melting away into newfound courage. In a whirlwind of emotion, the leader cried out, declaring they were all cowards, but Jacob pressed on. "You can still turn back." And just like that, one by one, the marauders began to leave. The leader was left standing alone, rage bubbling beneath the surface as Jacob held the shotgun steady. The last of them turned and galloped away, echoes of hooves fading into the twilight. A heavy silence enveloped the fields, the wind whispering around them as the air filled with disbelief. Jacob felt a surge of triumph and relief as he lowered the weapon, breathless from the battle he had fought, not just in defense of his land, but in a fight for humanity itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a new dawn approached, one marked by resilience. The fields were alive, the sound of the earth sighing as if awakened by freedom from chaos. In the days that followed, Jacob poured himself back into the rhythms of his farm, thankful for the chance to continue. He knew the power of courage had woken something in others, a realization that they could forge their own paths. He began hosting gatherings, inviting neighbors from nearby farms, sharing stories of struggles and triumphs. They gathered in the evenings, laughter echoing against the backdrop of the stars, stories uniting them like threads woven together in a tapestry of hope. Jacob understood now that vulnerability could ignite strength in the most unexpected places. The marauders had left frightened, but a flicker of potential sparked in their hearts. Perhaps one day they might find their way back, not as adversaries but as allies seeking a better future. As seasons changed, the land flourished, testament to Jacob's unfaltering spirit. Maplewood Farm stood tall, not merely as a patch of earth, but as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that hope could rise even from the ashes of fear. He had not only defended his land, but had become a beacon for others, a reminder that courage is a choice, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The farmer stood tall, strong against the sunset, knowing that together, even the darkest clouds could be chased away. And so, Green Valley thrived on, its heart beating strong and true, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who believe in standing up for what is right, even when faced with marauders at their gates. Jacob Miller was a guardian of the soil, a fighter for legacies, and a champion of choices forevermore. The sun hung low in the late afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the golden fields of Baywood Farm. The corn was ripe and heavy, swaying gently in the breeze that carried a hint of summer's end. But today, the air felt different, a prickling tension pulsed like a heartbeat. Jacob Landon could sense it deep in his bones. As he hoed between the rows, sweat trickling down his brow, an ominous rumble crept into the tranquility, a sound growing louder. It wasn't thunder, but something far more sinister, the unmistakable thud of hooves pounding against the dirt, drawing ever nearer. Jacob straightened, squinting at the horizon. It was a sight that chilled him to his core, A gang of marauders, dark figures riding hard toward his land. They were notorious, having carved a path of destruction through nearby towns, leaving chaos in their wake. Word had spread like wildfire, tales of fearless farmers forced to abandon their homes, lives uprooted by men who thrived on fear. And now they were coming for him. His heart raced, not from fear, but from fierce resolve. He would not run. He had fought too hard for his farm, pouring his sweat and soul into every inch of this land. Memories of long days spent planting and harvesting flashed before his eyes, the laughter of his children, the warmth of family gatherings on the porch. This was his legacy, and he would protect it at all costs. Jacob dropped his hoe and sprinted toward the barn, each footfall echoing his determination. Inside, he reached for the old rifle that had hung above the mantel, a relic from a different time when men like him had stood against tyranny. Dust stirred in motes of light as he pulled it down, its weight familiar and reassuring in his hands. He had prepared for this day, even if he hadn't known it would arrive. The marauders approached, a wall of dark leather and metal, confidence exuding from their every movement. Their laughter sliced through the air, venomous and mocking. Jacob stepped outside, rifle raised, determination gleaming in his eyes. He shouted, his voice steady but fierce. The leader of the gang, a rugged man with eyes like cold steel, stepped forward, his smirk widening. "What's this, an old farmer standing in our way?" Jacob felt anger boil within him. "You'll have to go through me." The marauders' laughter faded slightly, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They were accustomed to easy victories, but Jacob was not the kind of man to back down easily. "Boys, let's teach this man a lesson," the leader said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. But Jacob could sense the tension mounting, recognizing that perhaps they hadn't expected a fight. He aimed the rifle across the expanse of dirt and grass. "You think I'm playing? You don't understand what this land means to me." Every fiber of his being pulsed with the knowledge that this moment, this standoff, would define everything. It was more than just his farm. It was about standing up against a force that sought to tear down everything good and pure. With that, he pulled the trigger, the shot ringing out like thunder, a warning shot that tore through the air. Dust kicked up at the feet of the horses, startling them. The marauders halted, confusion mingling with uncertainty, and for a brief moment Jacob could see the cracks forming in their confidence. "Leave while you can," he shouted, pulse racing. "What's the matter?" The leader's voice broke the silence, but Jacob could hear the tremor in it. It was a different kind of fear, one that respected courage. Something shifted among the marauders. They were no longer just a gang of thieves. They were men facing a resolute challenge. Jacob took a small step forward, eyes locked onto their leader. "This isn't a game. You don't have to continue this path." And then, from the back of the group, a young man spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked almost apologetic, the weight of what was unfolding heavy on his shoulders. Jacob could see that flicker of doubt. The boy had been forced into this life, and the burden was evident. The marauders exchanged glances, the bravado of their leader slipping. The leader yelled back, his face growing flushed with desperation, but the doubt had already taken root. "I'm tired of this," the young man insisted, now standing slightly apart from the gang. "We don't have to hurt anyone." Jacob seized the moment. "Exactly, you have a choice. This life doesn't have to be about chaos. Are you really willing to live like this?" The group began to waver, tension replacing arrogance. The leader's frustration grew as he realized he was losing control, but Jacob pressed on. "Stand with me." The young man stepped back from the group entirely, eyes bright with newfound courage. Jacob could feel it, a tide turning, hope creeping into shadows. "I'm leaving." One by one, faces of doubt began to bloom among the marauders, confusion spreading. Jacob could sense a crack in the wall they had built to protect themselves. The boy continued, his voice gaining strength. "I don't want to hurt anyone." The quiet murmurs grew into a cacophony as some among the gang began to lower their weapons, uncertainty dancing between them. The leader raised his hands in frustration, but it was too late. His power was slipping through his fingers like sand. With a surge of adrenaline, Jacob felt the moment shift. "You've all wanted something more. Take a chance. Leave while you still can." The gang members hesitated, the weight of their decisions heavy in the air. Jacob could hear their breaths, could see the battle swelling within them. It was a moment charged with possibility. One of the older marauders asked hesitantly, his grip on his weapon tightening. Jacob nodded, sensing their collective resolve. Then prove it, don't let fear dictate your lives. The leader shouted, desperation clawing at him. You'll all regret this. But his voice faltered, the uncertainty now palpable among his men. The marauders looked around at each other, some stepping back from the group, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Without the leader pulling them along, they began to break ranks. The young man turned, his back to the leader, and with that, a hushed revelation washed over the remaining marauders. What had once felt like inevitable defeat transformed into a breath of possibility. One by one, they turned their horses, at first hesitantly and then more resolutely. Jacob's heart soared as he held his stance, the rifle steady in his hands. He shouted after them. And with that, they galloped away, hooves pounding against the dirt as they faded into the distance, leaving only the faint echo of their departure behind. The tension that had gripped the air lifted, a fragile peace settling over the fields. Jacob lowered his rifle, breath coming in shaky bursts as he realized what had just happened. He had faced down marauders and somehow, against all odds, turned them away. But as the last remnants of the gang disappeared into the horizon, Jacob's triumph twisted into unease. There was still a sense of danger lurking just beneath the surface, a reminder that their leader was still out there, a dark shadow among the hills, and he would not easily forget the humiliation of defeat. With the sun setting behind him, Jacob turned back toward the house, still reeling with adrenaline. He felt a flickering hope but knew the world wasn't done testing him yet. He didn't need to wait long. That night the wind howled through the trees as darkness enveloped the farm, an eerie reminder that he was not yet safe. As Jacob sat on the porch, staring out into the vast expanse of land he had fought to protect, he heard it, the familiar sound of hooves returning, gathering strength like a storm rising on the horizon. His heart dropped, ice racing through his veins. The marauders were back, but this time it was different. They weren't coming for crops, they were coming for revenge. With desperate urgency, he jumped up from his chair, adrenaline surging. He had bought some time, yes, but the marauder leader wouldn't let this go easily. They would be back and they would want more than just what he had. And in that moment, looking at the darkness approaching, Jacob knew he had only just begun a battle that could change everything. He could no longer simply protect his land. He would need to fight for his life and for the lives of those he loved. Just as he set down the rifle to grab more ammunition, a shadowy figure emerged from the night, riding fast and furious. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. The leader was there, determination etched on his face, a wicked glint in his eye. He shouted as he halted just outside the yard, voice booming over the sound of his remaining marauders gathering behind him. Jacob's heart raced, and he felt the weight of impending chaos. The fight for his land had just escalated, and he knew he had to prepare himself, for this time it would be a fight to the bitter end. The shadows danced closer, and as Jacob stood there facing the storm, he realized the real battle was just beginning.